Hey, Sip and Talkers. It's your host, Joe, and with me as always, Sunny.
Hey, Joe. What's up?
You know, just the usual, trying to stay one step ahead of those internet scammers, Sunny.
Oh, tell me about it.
But speaking of internet shenanigans, you will not believe what happened to our friend Micky.
Oh, no. What happened to Micky?
So, he's been making these awesome videos of his Asia trip.
Right?
And in his latest one, all about Taiwan, somebody in the comments thought he was in Thailand.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I get it. Both places, amazing travel destinations, but come on, people.
Yeah, they're pretty different places.
It's like confusing a panda with a polar bear.
Yeah, like apples and oranges.
Right. Poor Micky was so excited to share all the cool things about Taiwan,
right.
The history, the culture, the food, and people are out there thinking it's the same as Thailand.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how much we need to, dive deeper into these places and, uncover what makes them unique.
Yeah.
And today, that's exactly what we're going to do with Taiwan.
Let's do it.
So Sunny hit us with some knowledge. Let's rewind the clock and talk about Taiwan's history.
Okay.
I'm talking way, way back before anyone even thought about confusing it with Thailand.
Okay, so let's go way back, long before Chinese influence.
Okay.
Taiwan was home to indigenous Austronesian tribes.
Okay.
They had their own distinct cultures and languages. They were there for centuries. Then the 17th century rolls around and things start to get interesting.
So that's when the Chinese influence really started.
Well, even before the Chinese, there were the Spanish and the Dutch trying to, stake their claim. It's amazing how many different cultures have left their mark on this island.
Talk about a melting pot. So the Spanish and the Dutch didn't quite stick around, but the Chinese did.
Exactly.
Right.
It was the Qing dynasty that really cemented Chinese influence in Taiwan. But hold on tight, because things are about to get even more wild.
I'm sensing drama. What happened next?
Okay, so fast forward to the late 19th century Japan. A rising power at the time had their eyes on Taiwan. They saw it as the strategic asset, and bam, they end up ruling the island for 50 years.
Oh.
From 1895 to the end of World War II.
That's a long time. So what happened after the war? Did Taiwan finally get its independence?
Not so fast. Things get even more complicated because the Chinese Civil War between the communists and the nationalists, the Kuomintang reignited, the communists win, and the Kuomintang flees to Taiwan, bringing with them millions of refugees.
So two Chinas emerged, one on the mainland and one in Taiwan.
You got it. And that split, my friend, has been a major source of tension ever since.
Okay, so we've got a historically and politically complex island on our hands. But here's the thing. Taiwan isn't just about its past. It's also about its incredible economic transformation.
Yeah.
How do they go from an agricultural economy to a tech powerhouse? It's like a Cinderella story, but with microchips instead of glass slippers.
It's truly remarkable. In the 1940s, Taiwan was all about agriculture. Sugar, rice, you name it. But after the war and the influx of refugees, they needed to find a new path.
And they did right.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't be talking about them today if they hadn't.
Yeah.
So what was their secret? Did they stumble upon a magic lamp and wish for economic prosperity?
Haha, not quite. But they did have a few things working in their favor. Firstly, the Kuomintang had brought the gold reserves from mainland China, which provides some initial stability. Plus, they had a powerful ally in the U.S., which provided substantial aid.
Ah, so the U.S. was backing Taiwan against Communist China.
You got it. And then there was the Korean War, believe it or not, that actually boosted Taiwan's economy.
Wait, how did a war help their economy? Did they start making tanks or something?
Not quite tanks, but close. The U.S. needed supplies for their troops in Korea, and Taiwan was perfectly positioned to provide them. Plus, the infrastructure built during Japanese rule, like the railway system, gave them a solid foundation.
Interesting. So things were looking up for Taiwan.
Yeah.
But how did they get into this whole tech scene? Did they see a fortune cookie that said, invest in semiconductors?
Maybe. But seriously, the 1970s were pivotal. This was a time of rapid globalization and growth in the electronics industry.
Ah, the era of disco and the first home computers, bell-bottoms and floppy disks.
Yep. And American companies facing stiff competition from Japan in electronics were looking for ways to cut costs.
Makes sense. So they turned to Taiwan for cheaper labor.
Exactly. At first, American investments were mainly focused on Singapore and Malaysia. But Taiwan got 3 plants for final assembly of electronics. The Taiwanese government, however, had bigger dreams. They didn't just want to be an assembly hub. They wanted to play in the big leagues.
Ambitious. But how do you go from assembling gadgets to becoming a tech giant? Did they have a secret training montage like in those sports movies?
Well, they did make some really strategic moves. In 1973, they established the Industrial Technology Research Institute, or ITRI.
ITRI. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What is that, a top-secret tech lab hidden in a volcano?
Not quite a volcano, but it was, and still is, a hub for research and development. They were all about turning research into real-world applications, focusing on commercially viable products.
So they were thinking about the market from the start. No ivory tower research for them.
Exactly. And here's where a little bit of luck comes in. A Chinese expatriate working at RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, advised Taiwan's Minister of Economy to focus on semiconductors.
Semiconductors. Those tiny little chips that power everything from our smartphones to our refrigerators. Talk about a good tip. So they took his advice and ran with it.
They sure did. They convinced RCA to transfer semiconductor technology to Taiwan by 1976. Talk about a game changer.
Wow, so they basically bet on the right horse at the right time. It's like they had a crystal ball and saw the future of tech.
You could say that. And they didn't stop there. They poured resources into building up their domestic semiconductor industry, even creating a dedicated science park in Hsinchu in 1980.
A science park? That sounds so futuristic. Were they flying around on hoverboards and talking to robots?
Not quite. But it was a serious investment in their future. This is where ITRI set up the United Microelectronics Company, or UMC, the first semiconductor manufacturing company in Taiwan.
So they were all in on the semiconductor thing. No turning back now.
Absolutely. And while they were busy building things up at home, they also sent their best and brightest engineers to Silicon Valley. It's like they were sending their A-team to learn from the Jedi Masters of tech.
Talk about a smart move. Learn from the best in action. Bring that knowledge back home, and boom, you've got a recipe for success.
Right. And these engineers didn't just learn, they brought back valuable connections and experience that proved crucial for Taiwan's tech industry. There's a great story about Dr. Shi Qinte, one of these engineers who came back to Taiwan after working as a chip designer in the U.S.
Okay, I'm hooked. What did Dr. Shi do? Did they create a super chip that could control the weather?
Not quite. But they did something pretty amazing. They set up one of the first experimental semiconductor factories in Taiwan using the technology transferred from American companies. And guess what? This factory actually outperformed RCA's own production rate.
Seriously, that's like a student outsmarting the teacher.
Exactly. It was a clear sign that Taiwan was on its way to becoming a major force in the semiconductor world.
Okay, we've gone from ancient tribes to colonial powers to a nation of engineers taking on the tech giants. What happens next in this epic tale of technological triumph? I'm on the edge of my seat.
Well, things get even more exciting when ITRI recruits this guy named Morris Chang.
Okay.
He's a Chinese-American engineer, a vice president at Texas Instruments with tons of experience in chip production.
Okay, they brought in the big guns. Was he like the tech version of a superhero swooping in to save the day?
He was definitely a visionary leader. He realized that Taiwan couldn't compete head-on with giants like the U.S. and Japan in making consumer products, so he came up with a brilliant strategy.
Ooh, a brilliant strategy. Lay it on me.
It's called the foundry model. Instead of trying to create their own brands of electronics, they decided to become the best darn semiconductor suppliers for all the big tech companies.
So they were like the master chefs supplying the freshest ingredients to all the best restaurants.
That's a great analogy, and it worked like a charm. In 1987, Chang founded the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, or TSMC.
TSMC. Now that name rings a bell. Aren't they like the biggest chip maker in the world now?
That's right. And it all started with this foundry model. They essentially said, hey, you focus on designing those cool gadgets, and we'll provide the brains. American and Japanese companies loved it because it meant lower costs and higher profits.
A win-win for everyone. Except maybe for the companies that were trying to compete with TSMC.
Well, there's always competition in the business world. But the foundry model wasn't just about churning out chips. It was about becoming indispensable partners. They knew semiconductors were the heart of the global electronics industry, and they positioned themselves as the most reliable and advanced supplier.
So they were building a reputation, a brand of trust, kind of like how we've built a reputation for the best podcast in town.
Exactly. And their long game paid off big time. In just a few years, Taiwan's IT output skyrocketed.
Wow. Talk about a success story.
Right. And there were a few key ingredients to their success. One was the government's policy of encouraging competition among local producers. Unlike other Asian countries that focus on building a few giant companies, Taiwan fostered a more decentralized and dynamic industry.
So it was like a breeding ground for innovation with all these companies pushing each other to be better.
Exactly. And we can't forget the crucial role of ITRI in bringing together research institutes, small and medium enterprises, and large corporations, creating a powerful network of collaboration.
They're like the puppet masters of the tech world, pulling all the strings and making magic happen.
And let's not forget those engineers who trained in Silicon Valley. They brought back not just technical know-how, but also valuable connections and an understanding of global markets.
They were like tech ninjas infiltrating Silicon Valley and coming back armed with secret knowledge.
I guess you could say that. They played a crucial role in Taiwan's rise to the top.
I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip and Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.
Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I feel like we just ran a marathon through Taiwan's history and economic rise.
We did cover a lot of ground in part one. From ancient tribes to tech ninjas, Taiwan's journey has been anything but boring.
And we ended on a bit of a cliffhanger with that whole silicon shield concept.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It's like Taiwan's got this invisible armor made of microchips.
It's definitely a unique form of deterrence. Essentially, Taiwan's dominance in the semiconductor industry has created this strategic buffer against potential aggression, especially from China.
Okay, so remind me again about this whole China-Taiwan situation.
Yeah.
It's a bit complicated, right?
It is a complex relationship. Remember, after the Chinese Civil War, two separate governments emerged. The People's Republic of China on the mainland and the Republic of China in Taiwan.
Two Chinas, two different paths.
Exactly. And China, under its One China policy, has never renounced the use of force to bring Taiwan back under its control.
So they see Taiwan as a breakaway province that needs to be reunified, even if it means using force.
That's the gist of it. But despite this official stance, relations between mainland China and Taiwan have gone through periods of thawing and cooperation, particularly in the economic realm.
Really? So they're rivals, but they're also doing business together. That's a tricky balancing act.
It is. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, there was a lot of cross-strait investment and trades in the China. Taiwanese companies poured billions into China, taking advantage of lower production costs. And China became Taiwan's largest trading partner.
So even with political differences, money talks.
It often does, but there's a catch. This economic interdependence also created vulnerabilities for Taiwan.
How so? Did they become too reliant on China?
Well, as China's economy grew, they realized they were heavily reliant on Taiwan for those crucial semiconductor chips. In fact, they were importing more chips than oil.
Wow, that puts things in perspective. It's like saying they needed those chips to breathe.
It was a strategic weakness for China, and they knew it. So they started investing heavily in their own semiconductor industry, trying to catch up to Taiwan and reduce their reliance.
So it's a tech race. Who can make the best chips the fastest?
You could say that. And Taiwan, realizing the potential threat, has been trying to diversify its economic ties, investing in Southeast Asia and other regions. But the silicon shield remains a key factor in the equation.
Okay, so back to the shield. How exactly does it work? Does Taiwan have a giant laser cannon powered by chips?
Ahaha, if only it were that simple. It's more about mutually assured economic destruction. China knows that any military action against Taiwan would disrupt the global semiconductor supply chain, which they heavily rely on. It would hurt them just as much as it would hurt everyone else.
It's like they're holding the world's tech hostage, but it's also their own lifeline.
Exactly. The economic consequences of a conflict over Taiwan would be so severe that it acts as a powerful deterrent.
So it's a risky bet for China, to say the least. But do you think this silicon shield is strong enough to protect Taiwan in the long run? What if China decides it's willing to take the economic hit?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. China is determined to reduce its dependence on Taiwan, and they're pouring resources into catching up in the semiconductor race.
So the shield might weaken over time.
It's a possibility, especially if China makes significant technological breakthroughs. But Taiwan isn't just sitting still. They're constantly innovating and pushing the boundaries of technology.
Right. We've talked about how they ace the semiconductor game, but they're also making waves in artificial intelligence, right?
Absolutely. They've got this ambitious AI action plan, investing in research talent development and applying AI across various industries, from healthcare to manufacturing. Right. They're looking beyond semiconductors to secure their future.
Smart move. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, as they...
Exactly. But we have to acknowledge the geopolitical realities.
Yeah.
The tensions between China and Taiwan are very real, and the silicon shield might not be an impenetrable fortress forever.
So it's a race against time.
In a way, yes, Taiwan needs to keep innovating, strengthening its partnerships with other countries, and making itself even more indispensable to the world, all while preparing for the possibility of conflict. It's a delicate balancing act.
Wow, this is heavy stuff. We've gone from a silicon shield to a global ship race to a geopolitical tightrope walk. I need another sip of my drink. We've only scratched the surface of this complex issue, folks. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore what all of this means for us, the average folks, sipping our drinks and navigating this crazy world.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Sip and Talk. We've journeyed through Taiwan's history and its economic rise, and that nail-biting geopolitical tightrope walk, all thanks to their tiny but mighty semiconductor industry.
It's been quite a ride, but now let's bring it all home. What does this mean for us, the folks sitting here, sipping our drinks and trying to make sense of this crazy world?
Right. Taiwan might seem far away, but their story actually has a huge impact on our lives. Think about it. How many electronic devices do you use every day?
Oh man, don't even get me started. My phone, my laptop, my smart speaker. I'm practically a walking circuit board.
Exactly. And chances are, a good chunk of those chips powering our digital lives came from Taiwan. They're like the unsung heroes of the global tech industry, which means their stability and prosperity are directly linked to ours.
That's right. What happens in Taiwan doesn't stay in Taiwan. It ripples out across the entire world, impacting everything from the price of our gadgets to the pace of technological innovation.
Okay, so we've established that Taiwan is super important to, well, pretty much everything. But what can we actually do about this whole situation? It feels kind of overwhelming.
It's true. There's a lot at stake. But the first step is awareness. Understanding the complexities of this issue, the historical context, the economic interdependence, the geopolitical tensions is crucial.
So listening to this podcast is a good start. We're doing our part.
You got it. The more informed we are, the better equipped we are to engage in meaningful conversations and advocate for policies that promote peace and stability in the region.
Right. Knowledge is power. And speaking of power, remember that whole silicon shield thing? Do you think it's enough to deter China in the long run? What happens if that shield starts to crack?
That's the big question, isn't it? No one has a crystal ball, but there are definitely things we can do to prepare for different scenarios. Firstly, we need to support efforts to diversify the global semiconductor supply chain. Relying too heavily on any single source, even one as crucial as Taiwan, creates vulnerabilities.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Spread the risk, right?
Exactly. Think of it like investing. You wouldn't put all your money into one stock no matter how promising it seemed. We need a more balanced and resilient global tech ecosystem.
So how do we do that? Do we start digging for silicon in our backyards?
I wouldn't recommend that. But seriously, supporting initiatives that encourage semiconductor production in other parts of the world is a good start. The U.S. is already doing this with the CHPS and Science Act, and other countries are following suit. It's about creating a more level playing field and reducing dependence on any one location.
Right, and that brings us back to those geopolitical tensions. It's like everyone's playing a high-stakes game of chess with these tiny little chips. What can we do to encourage peace and stability in the region?
While supporting diplomatic efforts to foster dialogue and understanding between China and Taiwan is crucial, we need to find ways to address their differences peacefully and constructively. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions, but communication and diplomacy are always a good starting point.
It's like in any relationship, communication is key.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the human element. Taiwan isn't just a strategic asset or a source of chips. It's a vibrant democracy with a rich culture and millions of people who deserve a peaceful and prosperous future.
Right. It's easy to get lost in the tech talk and geopolitics. But we need to remember that there are real people at the heart of this story.
Exactly. Their voices, their perspectives, their hopes and dreams are what matter most.
Okay, Sunny, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Taiwan's story is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the power of innovation. They faced incredible challenges: colonization, civil war, economic hardship. Yet they've managed to not only survive, but thrive, becoming a global leader in one of the most crucial industries of our time.
It's a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, there's always hope, there's always room for progress, and there's always the potential to find solutions that benefit everyone.
And while Taiwan's future may be uncertain, one thing's for sure: they'll continue to play a vital role in shaping the technological landscape and the global order. So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep sipping those drinks, folks.
Cheers to that. And that's a wrap for our Taiwan Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. We encourage you to continue exploring this topic, do your own research, and form your own opinions. There's a whole world of information out there waiting to be discovered.
And hey, if you stumble upon any cool facts or insights, share them with us. We're always up for learning more.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay thirsty for knowledge. See you in the next Deep Dive.
Bye, everyone.